right, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 24th Newmarket Budget Committee. I'd like to first ask that everyone stands for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm Chris Wolf. I'm the Vice Chairman, standing in for Mike LaBranch, who's away this evening. Let's see, Roger is here.
Yes.
Richard is here.
Yes.
I'm here. Ned Carpenter is here. Brian Hickey is here. Brian Ward is here.
Here.
I'm sorry, your name, please? Thank you. And that's all. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. Public forum. I open the floor to public forum. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll close the floor for public forum. New business this evening. We'll be hearing a report from Bill Tappan on the town finances.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Before you arrived, I dropped a memorandum that I usually provide to Steve Fournier, which also gets CC'd to the Budget Committee. And so this is basically what I'm going to be telling you tonight, so I wanted to give you a heads up. Sorry it didn't come earlier. Basically, the expenditures for period 3, which is where we are at this point in terms of reporting, we're at about 31%, which is roughly where we were in the prior year, or actually 30%. And typically what you do is you're looking at not spending over 25% at this point. However, when you put encumbrances into that, it elevates it somewhat. And so that's why we're at the point where we are in terms of percentage spent. Just to kind of reflect on the financial conditions, I wanted to say that basically they haven't changed substantively since the end of the prior fiscal year when we were here last. There's been continued pressure internationally on fossil fuel commodities, and that's caused fuel increases, and everybody knows this. Yes?
I mean, a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Your memorandum subject is different than it looks like the report. Is it? Could you clarify the memorandum? The subject title is.
Oh my goodness, you caught me. Sorry.
So is
I didn't see that.
Is this first quarter or end of year?
This is actually the period 3, so it would be first quarter. Oh, that's terrible. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Bill, the
Yeah.
town is on a July to June fiscal year.
That's correct, July to June. Yeah.
And have we seen the financials for the fiscal year?
You did. Are you talking about the prior fiscal year?
For the
For 22, we reported on that when Steve was here last.
okay.
That was the end of the fiscal year. We were essentially in the midst of preparing for our audit, but it was a relatively accurate accounting of where we were at that point. But where we are tonight, and I apologize for the subject. We're looking at period 3 financials, or that would translate to the first quarter, right? So what I should do is send it to you from now on for editing before I send this out.
Do you have other questions on it?
Anything else?
No, the financials for the first, the detail that says it's attached,
Yes.
has that been made available to the committee?
Yes, it was prior to the meeting. I believe it was sent to Chris.
Okay, because it apparently didn't get distributed.
Didn't get to
To
Yeah, I
my
believe
knowledge,
it was sent to Chris from Steve.
Yeah, it was just myself
When
and
you guys were
Mike,
communicating.
so then it's I'll apologize for it
okay,
not going beyond.
okay, because I haven't seen it, and
All
that's
right,
why I
I'll
was,
send it around to everybody later this evening, tomorrow morning.
thank you.
I should know the answer to this, but
Sorry.
could you just
Yes.
explain what the encumbrance is, what that means?
Oh, sure. So essentially what you're doing, an encumbrance means that money that you're setting aside at the beginning of the year because you know you're going to spend
Okay.
that. And it's one of the columns that you typically will see, and it'll say how many encumbrances you have
Okay.
in any given line item. And so that will pump up your expenses overall in terms of the number and percentage. And so I'll give you an example of one that we typically do, IT services, for example. And that we know, because we know we're going to spend a certain amount of money because we're under contract. Same thing with a few other.
So you set aside the whole contract?
The whole amount, we do what's called a purchase order, and then we spend down that purchase order
Yeah.
throughout the year. So then so it should become zero. It should be zero period, but then you will have expended everything by the end. So that's what encumbrance is all about. Okay, so, right, you know about the fuel costs, you're experiencing this. Fortunately, we haven't been hit all that hard as of yet because our contract, current energy contract relative to electricity runs to December. And then in December, the electricity will actually hit the full effect of that. I will say on that Eversource is not under contract, and so what they do in terms of the delivery, we've already experienced that. So that's gone up significantly too, but I think, and I mentioned in here that the silver lining being that we've done some prior year investment in energy efficiency projects, and I think that is going to go some way to helping mitigate those costs long term. And that's both in terms of not just electricity, but also heating fuel and so on. So
Are you tracking kilowatt hour usage?
I'm not, but yes, we are. And they look at this overall in terms, because we've got this, I think it's a Siemens front end that we can pull reports from. And there's actually I believe it's an energy committee that meets regularly to go over this. If I remember right, we also have an annual report that's due to that committee, or at least to the council, to explain just how well the energy efficiency program is working since its inception.
Do you feel that's something you could share with us as well?
I'd have to ask.
Just as
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, well, maybe that's something you can look into and share with us, because I think we
Yeah.
would all find
Yes.
that interesting to see,
Yeah.
Comparatively to how, prior to the implementation of the energy savings, and then where we are today in terms of kilowatt hours used.
Absolutely. In full disclosure, we were having, I had just recently asked for the report, like recent in terms of probably 3 weeks ago, and they were having some difficulty, not because of the energy efficiency company, but because of we had switched apparently the front ends for management of these things back to Siemens, and they were having some problems with, I think it was the school server's email relationship, but I think that's back up and running. I just saw some emails flying back and forth about that today. So, yes, I don't see any reason why that couldn't be shared, but I'll make sure the town manager knows about your interest.
Thank you.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
And this is kind of minuscule, I think, in its impact, but I'm always curious when I go to Newmarket there's a charging station behind the library.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's that funded? Who pays for that electricity?
It's a good question. I
I
can't-
see people plugged into it all the time.
Right.
and
My understanding is it's pretty minimal, and the decision was made, again, I wasn't here for that, so I probably shouldn't be answering the question.
Okay.
But I believe that is, it's a town cost. but I don't know, honestly, I can't tell you what the cost is, and yeah, I honestly don't know. If it were really substantial though, it would pop out and I'd be flipping out over it. So it evidently isn't anything too crazy bad. But now that you say that, I will look into it.
Now you've picked the interest to take a walk by and see if there's a credit card slot machine.
I
No,
did.
it's not.
There's
It's
not.
free.
There's
No,
no,
it's
it's
free.
just
I did
there
that.
and it's
I
free.
think the idea is to, attract people to downtown, businesses, and that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think that it wasn't the whole part of putting a charging station into it, or where you're actually doing some kind of a PCS certified system for collecting money, was more expensive than the bother it would have been. And I think you're right. There was a hope to attract more people to come down and to encourage that sort of, use of electrical vehicles. But again, I wasn't here, so I can't really say for sure. Okay. In terms of revenues, if you when you do get your reports, you'll notice that there is year to date that it's positive compared to the prior year of just shy of 750,000, and that is largely due to the tax revenue commitment of 520,000 plus over the prior year, and then the year-to-date increase of $157,900 from the state's highway block grant. And then, I mean, there are other smaller incremental costs, but those really are the main reason for the jump. And then we finally are getting the money back from the very last portion of money that we'd spent on COVID mitigation efforts. And it actually turned out to be a little bit more money than they were originally agreeing to pay us back. And it was just because of me proving that we actually did spend the money and they needed to pay us. So that was nice.
So a question on the revenues, is this, this increase that we're talking about here, is this a windfall or is this sustainable?
That's a really good question.
Well, part of it's a
I
grant.
want to say yes.
obviously.
I'm sorry.
Part of it is a grant.
Right.
You know,
But
you've got the
those are
state
grants
highway
that come in every year,
Yeah.
oftentimes.
Mhm.
But that's why I hesitate to say, oh yes, this is going to be a sustainable thing, because it depends.
Is this an increase in the tax base?
Well, the larger portion is.
Yeah.
But in terms of the grant that I mentioned, the highway block grant, that is something that we see, but it goes up and down.
Mhm.
So it's really dependent upon how things are, statewide. And oftentimes these things are tied to federal monies as well. So, because we don't have a huge
Yeah.
amount of tax revenue coming in.
So the
from state.
520,000 is from, increased revenue due to increased value of the town. And the 158 is due to the block grant.
That's
Is
correct.
that what you're saying?
That is
Yeah.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
So the value of the town goes up, and tax revenue that comes in also increases as a result. And then every 5 years, I believe it is, under state law, we go through another reevaluation. And then typically tax rates go down or up, depends. And then you see, the reevaluation results. So, and the town is actually doing very well in terms of all economic indicators. I know everybody's talking about recession, but even in the case of a possible recession, I think the town is really well positioned. So, which makes me pretty happy for the community. So, anything else?
The amount on the reverse side here, the 429,000, was that a sum that was known to the CIP committee, and is it part of their recommendations?
Are you talking about the 479 ARPA funds?
Yes. So that's, because it's capital investment in the town's infrastructure, I assume, building.
It's, yeah, I wasn't part of the CIP process per se, so I don't know how this figured in. However, I do know that we were looking at, internally anyway, we were discussing this, and I believe this has been discussed with town council as well, that there were, I don't want to speak out of school, but there were fairly tight restrictions in terms of how you could use this, and it had to be used in ways that would go to helping, again, mitigate COVID spread and do things that would help. Then there were related to water, stormwater management got thrown in later in the process, and I'm trying to think of some of the other things, but largely it was around dealing with making sure that, like, say for instance, and broadband, that was another one that was part of this. There really isn't a broadband need per se for us to spend more money to increase broadband, because pretty well, this town is pretty well set for broadband. So my understanding is the hope is that they're going to be able to use most of this money to expand the second floor of the, fire and rescue.
So it wasn't identified, it wasn't identified in any of the reserve accounts as money that was being
Okay,
Because
invested.
but
Right,
they did
right.
request money for,
Was money requested for,
in what amount?
I'd have to go back and look at it specifically,
Okay.
But this was not part of capital reserve, and we probably, when the process started, I'm trying to remember if we had
I
actually.
understand it's not part of capital reserve, but
Right.
it is part of the funds that would be used to implement things that may or may not be on the CIP request, and I was trying to understand if CIP had been aware of this
No.
sum of money, and if it was accounted for at all in their planning.
no, it's a good question, and I don't have any recollection of that being mentioned as funds that were available or part of any capital reserve.
And I know there had been previously a request for improvement of the fire station, but I didn't think it was $479,000 worth of work.
It's actually higher than that. Which
It is.
Oh, yes. At least again, I'm probably speaking out of turn here, because I don't think this has even gone to council yet, so we're jumping ahead. But I wanted to let you know that we had received that second tranche, because I know I had mentioned it in prior meetings. And but how it gets used at this point is still uncertain, because it hasn't been approved. So there's a lot to be done before that. So again, I may end up having to backtrack simply because, it's up to the town council to make that decision. So. And like with the last section, much of that went to a number of things, COVID mitigation efforts, but there were also water project related monies, and we were hoping to do some cybersecurity stuff that also was allowed to be done under this. But that is, again, because of the expense of it and because of concerns over the money that we were using for water projects, I didn't want to have us run over and have spent or have it go higher than I thought it was going to be, and then have us spent $30,000 or whatever on cybersecurity for dark fiber. So we waited. So I probably shouldn't give any more opinion on this particular tranche of ARPA funds, just because of where we are.
What do we have, since you're bringing up the subject of cybersecurity, and obviously it is a concern when you have as many open ports into your network here. What's the town doing about that?
Well, okay, so this is a public session, and I'm very loath to discuss our cybersecurity profile. However, I will say that we've worked in a very dedicated fashion to close any ports to the outside. We've got various levels of firewalls in order to protect not just the town itself in terms of the straight up municipal government, but also the water and sewer departments, so that we're not going to have somebody hacking in and then flooding or shutting off all of our water sources. So I've paid particular attention to that in conjunction with the DES director and one or two of our vendors. So yeah, we've been, and the other thing, you know, it's just not to go on too much about this, but oddly enough, a lot of this is about patch management. So when, you know, Patch Wednesday comes up or whatever, we're trying to be very careful about making sure that we're managing those, and also retiring systems that frankly are no longer supported. So, and when I say no longer supported, I mean that you're just not getting any more fixes to known errors. And so that's been another thing that we've been working on over the last few years, just to make sure we're retiring systems as we know they're no longer supported. That's, and it's all levels, from servers to endpoints. So I hope that answers your question without being too specific.
Yeah, just to comment further, I mean, there was no request in CIP for any significant fire department building request. It was just vehicles. It was basically just the lease vehicle request. And this 479 wasn't reflected in any of the funds in terms of capital reserves, even though it may not be officially a capital reserve. So it wasn't part of the CIP process.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it would be part of the capital reserve, but I would think that it would have been a requested project, which is then shown as in recreation. Some of the requested projects are funded by grants and gifts and other fundraising as well as town monies.
Yeah, so
But certainly $500,000 is something that ought to be tracked.
absolutely.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, and so there were requests like from Recreation Department. We did see funds that were enterprise funds or grants,
Right.
but this wasn't anywhere.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi. I'm Sean Gregg with the Department of Environmental Services for the town of Newmarket. I'm responsible for the operation of the water and sewer departments. And I was told that you guys would have some questions for me tonight. So.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts?
Let me just start off with one question. I noticed in past years, when we look at the annual expenditures and revenues in the two enterprise, water and sewer, that one of them is generally has income greater than expenses, and the other has expenses greater than
Okay, so
income.
if you go back with the sewer, way back when we built the sewer plant, we arranged it so we created the fund balance as a sinking fund. So we raised rates, earlier at smaller amounts. So what actually happened was we built up the account, and then we built the wastewater plant, and then the bonds came due. So we're taking in more revenue. Now as we started to pay the bond off and kept raising rates till expenses met revenues, the fund balance would drop. On the water side, you've seen the fund balance grow because we're trying to do small increases so that when the bond comes due, which is going to be this year, we're going to end up deficit spending. So that was from the council back when we did this at the start. We said we could wait and do one large increase, or we can do small increases so that the residents didn't feel the pain.
So if there is receipts greater than expenses for one of the two services,
Yes.
that goes into a sinking fund?
It goes into the fund balance,
Into a fund balance.
which is being
Which-
treated as a sinking fund.
Which you then can draw upon in subsequent years.
Yeah, so when your expenses exceed your revenues, the fund balance just drops.
Okay, that's what I wanted, wasn't clear.
Yeah, so
okay.
if you actually look at this past year revenues and expenses on the sewer side, the revenues actually met expenses for the first time since that wastewater plant went online. And that's why there was no rate increases this year.
Okay.
What does next year look like?
Well, looks kind of scary. On the wastewater side, I will say the wastewater side looks great. And the reason for that is because we have started to take septage, and we've started to take a lot of septage. And to date this year, from July, we've made $131,000 on septage. And it also makes the plant run better. In the last 2 years, we've actually received a large sum of SAG grants, which is a state aid grant. The program was put on hold many years ago, but I applied for the grant, and then they started the program up again. And we started to receive money. So what has happened on the wastewater side is we still have a large fund balance because of all that money that's come in. My recommendation on that, and we're bringing to the council, is to put in a septic receiving station at the wastewater plant, which it looks like we could bring in probably $300,000 a year just from septic. And that will offset the increases of what's killing right now is inflation. I'm looking at a 10% increase. Every day I turn around, prices are going up on everything, especially chemicals. Because fuel drives everything. You know, to get stuff to me, it takes fuel. So I would say on the wastewater side, we look really good. The rate model did exactly what it was supposed to do. The rates came out exactly where we said they would be. On the water side, the rates were coming out very well, but inflation hit, and I haven't found any other way to offset those increases of inflation. So next year, it's going to hit the water side hard because of inflation, because there was just no way to anticipate that a few years ago when we set up the rate model.
So what type of, what are you looking for in terms of expense to build a septic receiving facility?
So we just did a pilot with some equipment, and it worked. It was very successful, and it's roughly just for the equipment for the septic. There's other equipment we need. It's probably going to be between $300,000 to $500,000, but we're going to use, and I've already designed it. I just have to go to the engineer and have everything confirmed. But we're going to use existing infrastructure. We already have tankage. We already have pipes in the ground. It's just putting in the equipment. I'm expecting it to cost about $1.2 to $1.5 million. But if we're taking $300,000 to $400,000 in septic in a year, you can see the payback's pretty quick. And my recommendation is to use the funds that we have so that in turn we're investing in, but we're going to realize that money right back, which is going to help keep the rates down.
Yeah. So how many gallons are you talking about in terms of, to generate $300,000 worth of income?
3 million gallons. We've already taken, this calendar year, we've already taken 2,335,000 gallons since the January 1st.
Where's that coming from mostly?
It comes from all over the area.
Lots of towns?
Yeah, lots of towns.
Was it the towns that are delivering, or is it just the septic?
It's septic, and it's 10 cents a gallon. And probably our cost is probably about 15% of that. So it's a very good, lucrative, and no other towns are building wastewater treatment plants now, but they're building houses with septic tanks. So they need a place to go. The other benefit to it is the plant actually performs better with it because the volatile fatty acids that are in the septage. So we're actually having our best year for effluent going out to the river. Typically, we've been around 3 to 4 on TN, which is what the EPA is looking at. This year, from January 1 to now, we're averaging 2.18, which is better for the environment.
Yeah.
Even though it may be better in that sense, there's a lot more volume though that's going in, right?
It's not a lot of volume, not when you look at that I treat 170 million gallons a year. When you're thinking 4 million, it's just a
not
drop
that
in the
big.
bucket.
Did we find the leak?
Yes. And we billed them for it.
So I'm just curious, was it
It was a new housing development,
oh, okay.
so. it
So
was-
that was an error on somebody's part.
I believe what happened is when they were, normally when you put a new water main online, you have to put chlorine in it and let it sit. And then before you take your bacteria sample, you have to bleed the chlorine off. They left a couple of their services on.
Just for clarification, this was a water leak?
This is a water leak,
Okay,
yes,
because
yeah.
we went directly from sewage
Yes.
to, and then
He-
I'm like,
he
1,000
changed
gallons,
direction,
and then
yes.
by the way, did we find the leak? And-
We
Probably,
changed subject.
probably a month ago, we had a large water leak that we could not find.
Right.
And we hired somebody to come in and they found it, and it turned out to be a new housing development, which they were built.
So they had equipment to help you find it?
The person that came in and did the leak detection found it.
Yeah.
So yes, and they actually checked the entire town, and they said the only leaks they could find were those. So we had a pretty tight system.
Weren't we bleeding like 100,000 gallons a day? Do I remember that?
80
correctly?
gallons a minute, yes.
Where on earth? You think there would have been a very large puddle somewhere?
Well, it was going into their drainage.
So they're not-
It happens, I mean,
If you dump it into the river, it takes a lot to
Yeah.
flow over that falls, yeah.
one year we actually had a leak in the bridge, at the bridge that went right into the river. Yes, and it was very difficult to find.
Yeah.
It happens. It's very difficult to find leaks because they're all underground. And if they're in an area where you have really good drainage, it gets difficult to find.
Just thinking about the water problems in New York City.
Yeah, well, there's water problems, you just go to Exeter, and, they're on stage 4.
Now, how about this is just a general question, since you're here, I might as well ask you some
Oh, you
questions.
can ask as many questions as you want.
So septic lines and things like that, what do you consider to be when a septic line is reaching end of life and things of that nature? How many years of service?
We do not do anything with septic systems, so I could.
No, what I mean is into a sewer lines and so forth that are feeding into your facility.
Oh, you're talking sewer mains?
Sewer mains, yeah.
Sewer mains would typically could have a 50-year to 100-year life to them, depending on how well they're put in and where they are and materials
And how do you
Those kind of
inspect
things.
those?
with a camera.
Yeah, you run them down and see what they look like?
When we get a chance or if there's a problem, yes. We do have a camera that we do with that. We don't get to use it as much as we used to because personnel is a big problem right now. Hiring and keeping personnel. There's not a lot of people going into the water or wastewater field.
How about, how do you, is the GIS accurate in terms of the location of sewer mains and things like that? So like if you were doing a project and you wanted to dig safe or something like that, it would tell you, roughly where it is or exactly where it is?
On the newer lines, yes, where we've put them in because we do GIS and we walk the lines. So yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We don't have a system that will allow you to like do an echo and see where they are underground, do we? Do you lease that type of equipment?
Well, we'll basically hook onto for a water main, we'll hook onto hydrants, and we're able to track the water main underneath the road. So we have other ways to track it, and because it has continuity into it, and that's how you track it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
I know a couple of years ago, you were concerned about the cost and the availability of sludge disposal. Is that still a problem?
And it's still a problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem. I want to say the biggest problems that we have facing us coming in the future is disposable of sludge, and and also emerging contaminants, which is PFAS, and some other chemicals that are man-made, which is going to make a major cost of testing. In the future, we're actually sitting very good for water. Once we complete our projects this year, we'll have we did our build out and we have more than enough for the next 30 years. But I do see in the future that for communities around, when you keep building, there's going to be no more water sources in the area. So that's going to be a concern way down the future where people are going to really have to manage their water.
Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Now's your chance to ask them.
Yeah, any question you want. And then if anybody wants to come down and have a tour of the facilities, you're more than welcome.
If you haven't had a chance to go, it's worth going.
It's worthwhile.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay. Okay, so the next item is discussion about the budget calendar, the committee calendar. I assume everybody has that?
Yep.
That was sent by Mike. And so we are now at, actually it's nice, we're at the top of the page here. Our next meeting is the 28th, so the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And we'll be listening to the school. The school will be presenting that day. We have it looks like we have 2 sessions available, so the 28th and then December 5th for the school. And then December 19th for the town, and then we move into public hearings and so forth. And then we have our meeting with the schools on January 30th. He's got an error there on that. And then the delivery session is February 4th. Did you want to add anything, or is the CIP just about wrapped up?
The CIP has done the schools, and I don't know what the schedule is to do that. So, I don't know.
If you haven't been to the CIP meetings, they're pretty interesting to attend.
So could I ask a question? What's this Saturday? What happens this Saturday? I have on my calendar, there's a town budget meeting of some sort. Does anybody know what that
This
is?
Saturday?
That's,
Yeah, that's
town
our
council.
budget meeting or budget proposal meeting.
that's the town council one, right?
Yes. Yeah, we're meeting at 9 o'clock here, 9 a.m. Here on the 15th, going over the proposed budget, which I got a copy of here, I think. Pretty sure it's open to everyone.
Okay, so that's this Saturday?
Yes, Saturday, the 29th at 9 a.m. And again, forward that email I got to you guys, to the group here too.
So you guys
Yep.
get that budget a few weeks before we get to see it.
Well, the town manager proposes a budget,
Yeah.
and it goes to town council. And town council just deliberates, and they make changes or whatever. And then town council, whatever they approve, gets delivered to us.
Yeah.
So this is the first, as I understand it, the first public exposure, the first time that the public can see the proposed town manager's budget and the discussion by the town council.
Yes, and I want to point out this, we just talked about this on our last meeting on Wednesday, so it's only been a couple of days.
So citizens can come to that meeting and
Yeah.
critique something if they don't.
It's also good background when we
Yeah.
come to look at the budget. There's some background to know what's been discussed in town council.
I'm gonna try to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I said, 9 a.m. Saturday, this building. I think it's going to be in the room upstairs. If not, you come down here and it'll be in here.
On the same note, the school district, we did our first budget workshop on Friday morning this past week, so the video should be available online if you want to have a look.
Yeah, and likewise, if you want to see Steve's presentation to the town council about the proposed budget, that was just on the 19th. He had a whole slide presentation too, so that'll be up, but didn't write, so.
So the document that you have there is what he's presenting?
Yes. You want to see it?
Pardon me?
Would you like to see it?
I'll contact Steve and see if
Yeah.
we can pass it around.
Okay.
Okay? Then everybody can have a copy of it.
Yeah.
You all right with getting a soft copy of that if you see?
Yeah, I mean, that's not the process though, right? It's you guys get it, you guys deliberate, you decide if you agree with them, then we get it.
Okay. Yeah, I only had it up because we were talking about
Yeah.
town financials.
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
So we would get a peek, get an idea what the subject matter is, and then we'll get the final one later. Does everybody want that? Okay, I'll ask Steve.
I mean, usually when we see it, we do see we see what the town manager proposed, we see what the council proposed. If they're different, we would see that,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, so so everyone's familiar with what's happening with the calendar. The minutes from the last meeting, does anybody have, has everyone had a chance to read those? Okay, does anybody have any adjustments they'd like to make? Any recommendations? Any
Yeah, I
differences?
have one minor change. Technical. In the fifth paragraph,
Are you looking at is there a line item beside it?
I don't have line items, unfortunately.
Okay,
Business, it starts out Business Administrator Mellon said in April, House Bill 17,
yes.
et cetera. It says a one-time contribution, 7.5% contribution from the state. I think it should be from.
From the state?
I think it's just a typographical error.
Okay,
Other than that, I saw nothing else.
okay.
It's top of the second page, the line number on it's 47, but, so this year the school opted to retain 2.5%, leaving an unassigned fund balance of $1,096,700 to go, it says to go back to the town, it should say to go back to the taxpayers to offset the tax rate, it doesn't go to the town.
Okay. All right.
That's all I had.
And I had a question on the, okay, that's just an error on his part, so, okay. All right, so that's it. All right, all in favor of the minutes as amended? Say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Okay. All right, so, anything else that anyone would like to discuss?
You know, this $479,000 is just kind of bugging me now, because if we think about it, that's capital funds that I know it's restricted, but we're not sure we really understand, nor did the CIP know about it or understand what it could have been used for. So it's possible that it might have caused us to do something different if we knew, you know, if we knew it was there. So I don't know what to do about that, other than, you know, if we have another CIP meeting, I'll raise that issue.
Yeah.
Because
So-
that's a lot of
That-
money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my concern was that should be transparent as to what these funds are gonna be
Yeah.
used for, and it should be part of our normal planning process,
Mhm.
because if it's something that we're saving money for to do on our own, and we can use the federal funds to do so,
Mhm.
that's very worthwhile.
Mhm.
But it still needs to be, you know,
Yeah.
needs to be part of the planning.
Yeah. For the transcriptionist benefit, this is a second page on Bill Tappan's report, and it deals with the ARPA funds and so forth, and the 479,269 that was identified as the state and local federal reserve recovery funds that's going to be used to do a construction project at the fire department.
Right, it also speaks to a conversation we had with them last year about making grant funds visible to us,
Correct.
which was kind of a little bit of a controversy, if I recall. So
No,
here, you know,
it-
here you are. It's
Yeah,
exactly-
it's a good, I mean, we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
You know,
Right, at least we know about
we know it's there now, and so it just needs to be integrated into the rest of the process.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say, that upstairs project at the fire station, that's been in the fire department's wish list in CIP since I did CIP, which has gotta be 5 years ago now. So it's, I'm not gonna defend the way that they're doing it, I'm just gonna say, I don't think this came completely out of the blue.
Oh, yes, I believe there was something as I recall, there was a request in last year's CIP.
not here this year.
But, so I was wondering whether it was in this year, that maybe they didn't make the request because they knew this funds were going to be available. It just, you know, if we're gonna do things, we just need to, they should make the request and then say, but we've got the money for it, here's where it's coming from. So, so it's part of the planning.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Okay.
Second.
Second? Okay. All right, thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And
Thanks, sir.
And you'll forward the